My little grandson asked me if he was allowed to have dinner, and that simple question broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. I want to pause here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far my story has traveled. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone rang with that sharp, urgent sound that always makes my heart skip a beat. The autumn rain was pattering against my kitchen window. As I wiped my hands on my favorite apron, the one with little yellow sunflowers that Tommy had picked out for me last Christmas, my son Michael was on the other line, his voice tight with stress and exhaustion. "Mom, I need your help desperately. I have to travel for work tomorrow morning and I'll be gone for a whole week. The company is sending me to oversee a construction project in Denver, and I can't get out of it. Can you watch Tommy for me? Camilla can't handle both kids alone with the baby being so fussy lately, and you know how she gets when she's overwhelmed." Of course I said yes without hesitation. Tommy was my 8-year-old grandson, my heart and soul, the light of my life. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 months, which was highly unusual for us. Before Michael married Camilla 2 years ago, Tommy would spend every single weekend at my house, helping me tend to my small vegetable garden, baking chocolate chip cookies together in my old kitchen, and curling up on my couch to watch cartoons while I braided his soft brown hair. Those were some of the happiest moments of my life, especially after losing my precious daughter-in-law, Sarah, when Tommy was only 3 years old. Sarah had been battling cancer for months, and when she passed away, Tommy became my everything. Michael was drowning in grief and work, so Tommy and I formed this unbreakable bond that kept us both afloat during those dark days. He would sleep in my bed when nightmares woke him up, and I would sing him the same lullabies I once sang to his father. The next morning, I prepared everything with the excitement and nervousness of a grandmother who was about to have her precious grandson all to herself for an entire week. I cleaned the spare bedroom that had always been Tommy's room, washing his favorite dinosaur sheets and fluffing his pillow until it was perfect. I went to the grocery store early when the morning air was still crisp and bought his favorite chocolate cereal, the expensive kind with the toy inside, fresh whole milk, and even picked the ripest strawberries from my backyard garden, remembering how he used to eat them straight from the plant with dirt still on his little fingers, giggling when I pretended to scold him. I kept glancing at the old wooden clock on my kitchen wall, the one that had belonged to my grandmother, counting the minutes until they would arrive. My small house felt too quiet, too empty without the sound of his laughter echoing through the hallways. I arranged fresh marigolds from my garden on the dining table, and even pulled out my good china, the white set with tiny blue roses that I usually saved for special occasions, wanting everything to be absolutely perfect for my grandson's visit. I polished the silverware until it gleamed and made sure the house smelled like the vanilla cookies I had baked that morning. I even put out his favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, on his bed, the one he'd accidentally left behind during his last visit months ago. When I finally heard Michael's car engine pulling up in my gravel driveway, I rushed to the front window with a smile already spreading across my face, my heart practically bursting with joy and anticipation. But what I saw through the glass made my smile fade instantly, replaced by a cold knot of worry settling deep in my stomach. Tommy stepped out of the car slowly, carefully, his small shoulders hunched forward like he was carrying an invisible weight that was too heavy for his little body. His head was down, his eyes fixed on the ground, his movements deliberate and cautious. He wasn't the bouncing, chattering, energetic boy who used to race up my front steps calling, "Grandma! Grandma!" at the top of his lungs, his arms outstretched for one of my famous bear hugs that would nearly knock me over. Michael looked completely exhausted as he carried Tommy's little suitcase to my door, dark circles under his eyes, and his hair disheveled like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "He's been pretty quiet lately," he said quickly, barely making eye contact with me. His words rushed like he was in a hurry to leave. "Camilla says it's just a phase kids go through, you know? Growing pains or something. Boys his age get moody sometimes, especially with the new baby taking up so much attention." He kissed Tommy's forehead briefly, almost mechanically. "Be good for Grandma, okay, buddy? I'll call you tonight before bed, I promise." Tommy just nodded silently, his big brown eyes, so much like his late mother Sarah's, with those long dark lashes that used to flutter when he laughed, staring down at his worn sneakers. There was something fundamentally different about him, something that made every grandmother instinct I possessed scream that all was not well in his world. After Michael's car disappeared down the tree-lined street, I knelt down carefully to Tommy's eye level, my knees creaking slightly, and gently tried to catch his gaze with the warm smile I reserved just for him. "Hey there, my sweet boy. Grandma has missed you so much. I've been counting the days until you could come stay with me. Are you hungry, sweetheart? I made your absolute favorite dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs with that special sauce you love. The one with the secret ingredient. And I got fresh Parmesan cheese from the fancy store just for you." He looked up at me then, and something deep in his expression made my chest tighten with alarm. There was a cautiousness there, a fearful wariness that no 8-year-old child should ever possess. His voice came out as barely a whisper, so soft I had to strain to hear him. "Okay, Grandma. Thank you very much." The formal politeness in his tone sent chills down my spine. This wasn't my Tommy, my little sunshine boy who used to chatter endlessly about his toys, his friends, his dreams. I led him slowly to my small dining room, where I had lovingly set the table with my best plates, soft cloth napkins, and even lit a vanilla-scented candle in the center, thinking it would make everything feel special and warm and welcoming. The rich aroma of garlic, basil, and oregano filled the cozy space as I served him a generous portion, adding extra cheese and 2 large, perfectly round meatballs just the way he used to beg for. His eyes lighting up with pure joy. Tommy sat perfectly rigid in his chair, his small hands folded neatly in his lap like he'd been trained, his eyes fixed on the steaming plate in front of him, but not moving a single muscle. Long, uncomfortable minutes passed in heavy silence, and he didn't even pick up his fork. The steam rose from his untouched food, carrying that familiar, comforting smell that should have made him smile. I waited patiently, thinking maybe he was just tired from the car ride or feeling shy after not seeing me for so long. But when I noticed his bottom lip starting to tremble and his breathing becoming shallow and rapid, I leaned forward with growing concern, reaching across the table. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Don't you like spaghetti anymore? Grandma can make you something else if you want. Maybe grilled cheese and tomato soup. Or pancakes. You know I'll make you anything your heart desires," I offered gently, reaching out to touch his small cold hand. That's when he looked up at me with tears gathering in his beautiful brown eyes, threatening to spill over, and asked the question that would haunt my dreams and change everything I thought I knew about my family. "Grandma, can I have dinner? Do I need to ask permission first? Am I allowed to eat this?" The words hit me like a physical blow to my chest. Permission to eat. My grandson, my precious boy, asking permission to have dinner at his grandmother's table? I felt my throat close up as a terrible, horrifying realization began to dawn on me. Something was very, very wrong in my son's house, and my innocent grandson was paying the price. I forced my voice to stay calm and loving, even though my hands were trembling. "Of course you can eat, my sweet boy. You never need permission here. This is your home too." The relief that washed over his little face was heartbreaking, but it also terrified me. What kind of household had my grandson been living in? Over the next few days, I watched Tommy with the careful attention of a grandmother, whose instincts were screaming that something was terribly wrong. Every single thing he did required permission in his mind. When I offered him a glass of orange juice at breakfast, he looked at me with those wide, fearful eyes and whispered, "Can I drink this, Grandma? Is it okay?" When he needed to use the bathroom, he would stand by the hallway, shifting from foot to foot, until I noticed and asked what he needed. "Can I go to the bathroom, please?" he would ask, as if it was a privilege I might deny him. Even when I told him repeatedly that he could go whenever he needed, he continued asking every single time. The most crushing moment came on his second day with me. I had bought him a new coloring book with dinosaurs, remembering how much he used to love drawing prehistoric creatures with wild, imaginative names. I set it on the coffee table with a fresh box of crayons, the kind with 64 colors that always made his eyes light up with possibilities. Tommy stared at the coloring book for nearly 10 minutes, his small hands clasped behind his back like a little soldier. Finally, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, he asked, "Grandma, am I allowed to color? Can I touch the crayons?" My heart shattered into even smaller pieces. This was not the boy I remembered. This was not my Tommy. I thought back to who he used to be before Michael married Camilla. Tommy had been pure sunshine, a child who would burst into my house like a whirlwind of energy and joy. He used to climb onto my kitchen counter to help me cook, getting flour in his hair and chocolate on his cheeks, chattering non-stop about everything and nothing. He would run through my backyard chasing butterflies, his laughter echoing off the trees like music. I remembered one particular Sunday morning about 3 years ago, when Tommy was 5. He had woken up early and found me in my garden tending to my tomato plants. Without asking permission, he had plopped down in the dirt beside me, grabbed a handful of soil, and declared that he was going to plant magic beans that would grow into a castle. His clothes got completely filthy, but his smile was so bright it could have powered the whole neighborhood. That same little boy now sat on my couch, afraid to pick up a crayon without written permission. During our quiet dinners together, I tried gently to draw him out, to understand what had changed. "Tell me about school, sweetheart. Do you still like your teacher, Mrs. Henderson?" Tommy would nod politely but offer nothing more. When I pressed a little, asking about his friends or his favorite subjects, he would give short, careful answers. "School is fine, Grandma. I try to be good." Try to be good. The phrase haunted me. What 8-year-old talks about trying to be good as if it's their full-time job? On the third night, as I was tucking him into bed, Tommy looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and said something that made my blood run cold. "Grandma, Camila says that children need to learn respect. She says I have to ask before I do anything, because that's how good boys behave." I kept my voice gentle, even though inside I was screaming. "What else does Camilla teach you about being good, honey?" Tommy's face scrunched up in concentration, as if he was reciting a lesson he had memorized. "She says I can't make noise when baby Lucas is sleeping, because he's more important than me playing. And I have to eat all my vegetables before I can have anything else, even if they make me feel sick, and I have to keep my room really, really clean, or I don't get dinner. Don't get dinner." The words echoed in my head long after Tommy fell asleep. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I was hearing. Was this discipline, or was this something much darker? The next morning, I watched more carefully as Tommy moved through his routine. Everything he did was deliberate and careful, as if he was constantly being evaluated. He made his bed with the precision of a hotel worker, folding the corners until they were perfectly sharp. He ate his breakfast in small, measured bites, finishing every crumb on his plate even though I could see he was full. When I suggested we go to the park, something I thought would surely bring back his old spirit, Tommy hesitated. "Is it okay if I play on the swings, Grandma? What if I get my clothes dirty?" At the park, While other children ran and shouted and laughed with wild abandon, Tommy sat quietly on a bench beside me, watching them with a longing that broke my heart. When I encouraged him to join them, he shook his head. "I don't want to be too loud." He whispered. That afternoon, when he thought I wasn't looking, I caught Tommy standing in front of my refrigerator, staring at the fruit bowl on top. He stood there for almost 15 minutes, clearly hungry, clearly wanting an apple, but unable to take one without permission. When I noticed and offered him the fruit, he looked genuinely surprised, as if kindness was something unexpected in his world. "Thank you, Grandma," he said, holding the apple like it was made of gold. "Camilla says snacks are only for special occasions." Each revelation was another piece of a horrifying puzzle. This wasn't normal childhood discipline. This was systematic control, designed to make my grandson afraid of his own basic needs and desires. The happy, spontaneous child I had known and loved was being methodically erased, replaced with a fearful, obedient shadow. As I watched Tommy carefully eat his apple, taking tiny bites and asking if he was eating it correctly, I realized that my worst fears were probably just the beginning. Something terrible was happening to my grandson, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. The fear in his eyes was growing deeper each day, and I knew I had to find out exactly what Camilla was doing to him behind closed doors. By Tommy's 4th day with me, I knew I couldn't just sit back and hope things would get better. The fear in my grandson's eyes was growing deeper, and my grandmother's instincts were screaming that something terrible was happening in my son's house. I had to find out the truth, but I needed to be smart about it. The next morning, after walking Tommy to school and watching him disappear into his classroom with that same cautious, frightened walk, I decided to have a conversation with his teacher, Mrs. Henderson. She had been teaching 2nd grade for over 20 years, and I trusted her judgment completely. I found her during her lunch break, grading papers in her empty classroom. When I knocked on the doorframe, she looked up with a warm smile that quickly faded when she saw the worry on my face. "Mrs. Johnson, how nice to see you. Is everything all right with Tommy?" she asked, setting down her red pen. I sat down in one of those tiny plastic chairs that made my knees ache. "That's what I wanted to ask you, Mrs. Henderson. Have you noticed any changes in Tommy's behavior lately? He's been staying with me this week, and I'm concerned about some things I've seen." Her expression grew serious, and she glanced toward the door as if making sure we were alone. "I'm so glad you came to talk to me," she said quietly. "I've been worried about Tommy for months now, but I wasn't sure if I should say anything." My heart started pounding. "What have you noticed?" Mrs. Henderson leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "It started about 6 months ago, right around the time I heard his stepmother had a baby. Tommy completely changed. He used to be one of my most outgoing students, always raising his hand, laughing with his friends during group work. But suddenly, he became withdrawn." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He doesn't play during recess anymore. He just sits on the bench by himself, watching the other children. And lunch," she shook her head sadly. "Every single day he asks me if he's allowed to eat his lunch. Even when I tell him yes, he eats so slowly, so carefully, like he's afraid someone will take it away." The confirmation of my worst fears hit me like a brick to the chest. "Has he said anything about home?" "Not directly, but there are little things. Once he spilled some milk during snack time. Just a tiny splash. And he started crying so hard I couldn't calm him down. He kept saying, 'I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'll clean it up. Please don't tell Camilla.' It broke my heart. I thanked Mrs. Henderson and promised to keep her informed of anything I learned. As I walked back to my car, my mind was racing. 6 months ago. That's when baby Lucas was born. When Tommy's world apparently turned upside down. My next stop was the neighborhood where Michael and Camilla lived. I had to be careful. I couldn't let Camilla know I was asking questions. I decided to start with Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived directly across the street from them. She was always working in her garden and had a clear view of their front yard. I knocked on her door with a casserole I had made that morning, using it as an excuse for the visit. Mrs. Patterson welcomed me in with enthusiasm, always happy for company and conversation. "How lovely to see you, dear," she said, leading me to her kitchen. "I was just having some tea. Would you like some?" As we sat at her small table, I carefully steered the conversation toward the neighborhood. "It's so nice that Michael found happiness again with Camilla. How are they as neighbors?" Mrs. Patterson's cheerful expression shifted slightly. She glanced out her window toward Michael's house, then back at me. "Well, dear, I don't like to gossip, but since your family," she leaned closer, "I've heard some concerning things coming from that house, especially in the evenings." My blood ran cold. "What kind of things?" "Shouting, mainly from Camilla, and crying. Definitely a child crying, not the baby. It happens several times a week, usually around dinner time." She fidgeted with her teacup. "I've thought about saying something, but I wasn't sure if it was my place." I pressed gently for more details, and Mrs. Patterson revealed that she had seen Tommy working in the yard on several occasions, doing chores that seemed too advanced for an 8-year-old. Scrubbing the driveway, organizing the garage, washing windows. Meanwhile, she had never seen baby Lucas outside without Camilla holding him protectively. "The boy always looked so serious," she added sadly. "Children should be playing, not working like little adults." After leaving Mrs. Patterson's house, I drove to visit my sister Eleanor, who had always been my closest confidant. Eleanor lived about 20 minutes away, and I needed someone I could trust completely to help me process what I was learning. Over coffee in her sunlit kitchen, I told Eleanor everything. Tommy's fearful behavior, his constant need for permission, the teacher's concerns, and what the neighbor had shared. Eleanor listened with growing alarm, occasionally gasping at the more troubling details. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. "There's something else you should know," she finally said. "I didn't want to worry you before, but I heard some things through my friend Carol, who works at the courthouse." My heart stopped. "What things?" "Camilla was married before Michael. She had a stepdaughter from that marriage, a girl about 10 years old. Carol told me there were some issues. Reports made to child services about emotional abuse. Nothing was ever proven definitively, but it was enough that her first husband fought for custody and won. The room felt like it was spinning. Camilla had a history of problems with stepchildren, and now my Tommy was living under her control. "Eleanor," I whispered, "what if she's doing the same thing to Tommy that she did to that little girl?" My sister reached across the table and gripped my hand. "Then you have to protect him. But you need to be smart about this. You can't just accuse her without solid proof, or Michael will cut you off completely, and Tommy will be even more isolated." As I drove home that afternoon, my mind was churning with everything I had learned. The pattern was becoming horrifyingly clear. Camilla had a history of targeting stepchildren, treating them as threats or burdens while favoring her biological children. Tommy's behavior had changed exactly when baby Lucas was born, when Camilla's attention and protection became even more focused on her own child. The teacher's observations, the neighbor's concerns, my sister's revelation about Camilla's past. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. My grandson was being systematically, emotionally abused, and everyone who might help him was either unaware or afraid to intervene. When I picked Tommy up from school that afternoon, I looked at his small, careful movements with new eyes. Every cautious step, every whispered "thank you," every fearful glance was evidence of what Camilla was doing to him behind closed doors. That night, as I tucked Tommy into bed, I made a silent promise to him and to myself. I was going to find a way to protect him, even if it meant going to war with my own son. My grandson's safety was worth any sacrifice, any conflict, any consequence. The question that kept me awake that night was not whether I should act, but how I could do it without losing Tommy forever. It was on the fourth night, as I was gently brushing Tommy's hair before bedtime, that everything came crashing down like a dam bursting under pressure. I had been patient, waiting for him to feel safe enough to open up, but I could see the weight of secrets crushing his small spirit more each day. "Tommy, sweetheart," I said softly, setting the brush down on the nightstand. "You know Grandma loves you more than anything in the whole world, right? And you know you can tell me anything. Anything at all. And I will never ever be angry with you." He nodded, but his eyes filled with tears that he tried desperately to blink away. I pulled him closer to me on the bed, wrapping my arms around his fragile little body. "What's really happening at home, my sweet boy? Please tell Grandma the truth." That's when the floodgates opened. Tommy's face crumpled, and he began sobbing with a desperation that shattered what was left of my heart. Through his tears, the words came tumbling out like water through a broken pipe. "Grandma, Camilla says I'm not really her son." He choked out between gasps. "She says I'm just Daddy's mistake from before, and that I should be grateful she even lets me live in the same house as her real baby." I felt my blood turn to ice, but I forced myself to stay calm, to keep holding him, while he finally released all the poison that had been building up inside his young heart. "She makes me ask permission for everything, Grandma. Everything. Even to go to the bathroom, even to drink water, even to sit down. She says children like me have to earn the right to basic things because we're not really part of the family." Each word was like a knife twisting deeper into my soul. I stroked his hair and whispered, "Keep telling me, baby. Get it all out." Tommy's voice became smaller, more broken. "When baby Lucas cries, and I accidentally make any noise, even walking too loud or dropping something. Camilla locks me in my room without dinner. She says Lucas is more important than me, and that I need to learn my place." I had to bite my lip to keep from screaming. "How often does this happen, sweetheart?" "Almost every day, Grandma. Sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. I get so hungry that my stomach hurts. But she says that's how I'll remember to be better." He looked up at me with those innocent brown eyes swimming in tears. "And Grandma, I don't even sleep in my bed anymore." "What do you mean, honey?" "Camilla says the bed is too good for kids who don't obey perfectly. She makes me sleep on the floor with just a thin blanket. She told Daddy that I chose to sleep on the floor because I like it better. And he believed her." Tommy's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "She's really good at making Daddy believe her lies." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold him. The systematic cruelty, the calculated emotional abuse. It was worse than my worst nightmares. This woman was deliberately destroying my grandson's spirit, piece by piece. "Tommy, have you tried to tell your daddy what really happens?" He shook his head frantically. "I can't, Grandma. Camilla told me that if I ever say anything bad about her, she'll make sure Daddy sends me away forever. She says no one would believe me anyway because I'm just a kid, and she's the grown-up." The manipulation was sophisticated and evil. Camilla had created a perfect system where Tommy was isolated, silenced, and convinced that speaking up would only make things worse. "She makes me do chores that are too hard for me," Tommy continued, his voice getting stronger as he finally released his burden. "I have to scrub the bathroom floor with a toothbrush, if I don't clean it good enough the first time. I have to wash all the dishes even though I can barely reach the sink. And if I break anything, even by accident, she screams at me and calls me stupid and clumsy." I was trembling with rage, but I kept my voice gentle. "What about when other people are around, sweetheart? What happens then?" That's when she pretends to be nice," Tommy said, his innocence making the situation even more heartbreaking. "When Daddy's home or when people visit, she hugs me and calls me sweetie and acts like the best mommy in the world. But as soon as we're alone, her face changes and she becomes mean again." The calculated nature of the abuse was chilling. Camilla was smart enough to maintain her facade while systematically tearing down an innocent child behind closed doors. "Grandma," Tommy whispered, looking up at me with desperate eyes. "Am I really bad? Is that why she treats me this way? Maybe if I try harder to be good." "No," I said firmly, pulling him even closer. "Listen to me, Tommy. You are not bad. You are perfect exactly as you are. What Camilla is doing to you is wrong, completely wrong, and none of it is your fault. But I could see that months of psychological abuse had already planted deep seeds of self-doubt in his young mind. He had been conditioned to believe that love was something he had to earn through perfect behavior, that his basic needs were privileges that could be taken away at any moment. "She says I'm lucky she doesn't make Daddy get rid of me completely," Tommy continued. "She says lots of stepmoms would just send kids like me to live somewhere else, and I should be thankful she's willing to teach me how to be better." The sophisticated manipulation made me sick. Camilla had convinced my grandson that her abuse was actually kindness, that he should be grateful for the cruelbs of affection she occasionally threw his way. As Tommy finally exhausted himself from crying and fell asleep in my arms, I stared at the ceiling with crystal-clear determination. The extent of the psychological torture my grandson was enduring was beyond anything I had imagined. This wasn't just strict discipline or a personality conflict. This was deliberate, systematic child abuse, designed to break his spirit and make him completely dependent on his abuser's approval. I gently tucked Tommy into his bed, his real bed, where he belonged, and kissed his forehead. As I watched him sleep peacefully for the first time in months, I made a promise that would change everything. When Michael came home in 3 days, I was going to tell him exactly what his wife was doing to his son. I didn't care if it destroyed our relationship or if he never spoke to me again. Tommy's safety was worth any personal cost, any family drama, any consequence. Camilla had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated the fierce love of a grandmother who would move mountains to protect her grandchild. When Michael's car pulled into my driveway that Sunday evening, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. I had spent the past 3 days preparing for this moment, rehearsing what I would say, how I would present the devastating truth about what his wife was doing to his son. Tommy heard the car door slam and immediately tensed up beside me on the couch, his small body going rigid with fear. The change in him was instant and heartbreaking. The relaxed, gradually healing child I had been nurturing all week disappeared, replaced by the frightened, hyper-vigilant boy who had arrived 7 days ago. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "Grandma is going to make sure you're safe." Michael walked through my front door with Camilla right behind him, carrying baby Lucas in her arms. She looked perfectly composed, dressed in a pretty blue sundress, her hair styled beautifully, wearing that practiced smile that I now knew was a mask hiding something monstrous. "Mom, thank you so much for watching Tommy," Michael said, giving me a quick hug. I hope he wasn't too much trouble. "How did everything go?" Before I could answer, Camilla swept forward with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Tommy, baby, Mommy missed you so much," she cooed, reaching out to embrace him. "Did you have fun with Grandma? Were you a good boy?" I watched in horror as Tommy immediately shrank into himself, his eyes downcast, his voice becoming that same fearful whisper I had worked all week to heal. "Yes, Camilla. I tried to be good." "Of course you were, sweetie," she said, stroking his hair in a way that looked loving but felt possessive. You know how important it is to behave properly. I couldn't stand it another second. Michael, I need to talk to you. Privately. Right now. Something in my tone must have warned Camilla, because her perfect smile flickered for just a moment before snapping back into place. Is everything all right, Mom? You sound upset. Everything is not all right, I said firmly, looking directly at my son. Michael, we need to discuss what's been happening to Tommy in your house. Michael frowned, glancing between me and Camilla. What do you mean? Has Tommy been telling you stories? You know how kids can exaggerate things. The dismissive tone in his voice made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. Sit down, both of you. What I have to tell you is serious. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything. I told them about Tommy's constant need for permission, his fear of eating, his terror of making any noise. I shared what his teacher had observed, what the neighbors had seen, and most importantly, what Tommy himself had revealed about sleeping on the floor, being denied food, and being told he wasn't really part of the family. As I spoke, I watched Camilla's face carefully. She was good. I had to give her that. She looked appropriately shocked and hurt, occasionally gasping and shaking her head in apparent disbelief. When I finished, Michael was staring at me with confusion and growing anger. Mom, those are serious accusations. Tommy's just a kid. He might have misunderstood some things, made them seem worse than they were. But it was Camilla's response that truly showed me the depth of her manipulation skills. Oh my goodness, she said, tears actually forming in her eyes. I can't believe this. I have tried so hard to be a good mother to Tommy, to give him structure and discipline because I love him. If he's been upset about some of my rules, I'm so sorry. But I was just trying to help him become a responsible young man. She turned to Michael, her voice breaking with practiced emotion. Your mother has never liked me, Michael. She's been looking for reasons to criticize me since the day we met. And now she's using Tommy to try to break up our family. I felt the conversation slipping away from me as Michael's expression softened toward his wife and hardened toward me. Mom, Camilla has been nothing but patient with Tommy. Maybe your approach is too permissive, and that's why he's having trouble adjusting to normal household rules. Normal household rules? I practically shouted. Michael, she's been making your 8-year-old son sleep on the floor and beg for food. That's not true, Camilla protested, holding baby Lucas closer as if protecting him from my lies. I have never, ever denied Tommy food. He's a picky eater, and I've been trying to teach him not to waste food by making sure he finishes what's on his plate before asking for more. The way she twisted everything, making her abuse sound like responsible parenting, was masterful and terrifying. I could see Michael wavering, wanting to believe his wife, wanting to avoid the horrible truth that his son was being emotionally tortured in his own home. Michael, I pleaded, look at your son. Really look at him. When has Tommy ever been this quiet, this fearful? This isn't the child you raised. But Camilla was already moving to her final play. I think, she said quietly, that Tommy needs consistency. All these different rules and expectations between our house and your mother's house are confusing him. Maybe it would be better if he had fewer outside influences until he adjusts better to our family dynamic. My heart stopped. She was trying to cut me out completely, to isolate Tommy from his only protector. Michael nodded slowly. Maybe Mom's right, Mom. Maybe having different rules at your house is making it harder for Tommy to follow the structure at home. Michael, no, I said desperately. You cannot isolate that child. I'm the only one who knows what's really happening. But I could see I was losing them. Camilla had played her cards perfectly, positioning herself as the victim in me, as the interfering grandmother causing problems. That night, after they left with Tommy clinging to my hand and begging with his eyes for me to save him, I made the hardest decision of my life. I called the Department of Child Services and filed a formal report. 3 days later, when social workers showed up at Michael's house for an unannounced visit, my phone rang with Michael's voice, filled with betrayal and rage. "How could you do this to us, Mom? How could you call strangers to investigate our family? Camilla is devastated, and now there's going to be an official record that could affect her job, our reputation, everything. I did it to protect Tommy," I said firmly, though my heart was breaking. "Well, congratulations," Michael said coldly. "You've managed to destroy our family. Don't call us, don't visit us, and don't expect to see Tommy again. You've made your choice, and now you have to live with it." The line went dead, and I realized that in trying to save my grandson, I might have lost him forever. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. Michael had cut me off completely, and I had no idea if Tommy was safe or if my intervention had made things worse for him. I barely slept, constantly wondering if I had done the right thing or if my actions had only given Camilla more ammunition to hurt my grandson. Then, on a cold Thursday morning 3 weeks later, my phone rang. It was a social worker named Janet Martinez. "Mrs. Johnson, I wanted to update you on the Tommy situation. We've completed our investigation, and I think you should know that your report potentially saved that child's life." My hands started shaking as she continued. "We found evidence supporting your claims. Tommy's room had no proper bedding, and when we interviewed him separately from his parents, his account matched everything you told us. We also discovered that Camilla had a similar case with her previous stepchild. The relief was overwhelming. But Janet wasn't finished. However, the family has agreed to participate in intensive family therapy rather than face child removal proceedings. Tommy will be staying with you temporarily while they work through this process." 2 hours later, Michael stood at my door with Tommy's suitcase, his face a mixture of shame, anger, and exhaustion. He couldn't meet my eyes as he spoke. "The therapist says Tommy needs to be in a safe environment while we work on things," he said quietly. "I don't understand how I missed it, Mom. How did I not see what was happening to my own son?" "Sometimes we see what we want to see," I replied gently. "What matters is that you're seeing it now." Tommy ran into my arms the moment he saw me, and I felt his small body trembling with relief. "Grandma, I get to stay with you." "Really?" "Yes, sweetheart. For as long as you need." But I quickly learned that healing wasn't going to be simple or fast. Even in my safe house, Tommy still asked permission for everything. The first morning, he stood in the hallway for 20 minutes, afraid to use the bathroom without asking. When I made him pancakes, he stared at them and whispered, "Can I really eat all of these?" The nightmares were the worst part. Almost every night, Tommy would wake up screaming, convinced that Camilla was coming to punish him. I would hold him while he sobbed, repeatedly telling him he was safe, that no one was going to hurt him anymore. "Grandma," he said one night, his voice small and broken, "what if I forget how to be good? What if I make mistakes, and you don't want me anymore? Tommy, listen to me," I said firmly. "You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to earn my love by being good. I love you exactly as you are, even when you make mistakes, even when you're sad or angry or scared." Progress came in tiny increments. After 2 weeks, Tommy stopped asking permission to get a glass of water. After a month, he began playing with toys without looking over his shoulder in fear. The first time I heard him laugh, really laugh, at a cartoon on TV, I had to leave the room so he wouldn't see me cry. The family therapy sessions were brutal. Michael had to face the reality that his wife had been systematically abusing his son while he remained willfully blind. Camilla, confronted with professional intervention, finally dropped her perfect mother act and revealed the bitter resentment she had harbored toward Tommy since the day she married Michael. "He's not mine," she screamed during one session that Michael later told me about. He's a reminder of Michael's past, of the life he had before me. Every time I look at him, I see her, his precious dead mother, that everyone still thinks was so perfect. The therapist helped Michael understand that Camilla's jealousy of his late wife Sarah had manifested as abuse toward their innocent son. It wasn't about discipline or structure. It was about a damaged woman taking out her insecurities on a defenseless child. After 6 months of intensive therapy, Michael made a decision that shocked everyone. He filed for divorce from Camilla and fought for full custody of baby Lucas, determined not to let another child suffer under her care. I failed Tommy once, he told me with tears in his eyes. I won't fail either of my children again. Tommy's healing continued slowly but steadily. He started 2nd grade at a new school near my house, where Mrs. Peterson, his new teacher, was aware of his situation and worked patiently to help him regain his confidence. She called me regularly with small victories. Tommy raised his hand to answer a question today. Or he played with another child at recess. There were setbacks, of course. Sometimes Tommy would revert to his old fearful behaviors, especially when he was tired or stressed. But each time he bounced back a little faster, trusted a little more, smiled a little brighter. The first time Tommy called me Mom by accident, we both froze. Then he started crying, apologizing frantically. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean to. I know you're not my mom." I knelt down and took his face in my hands. "Tommy, it would be the greatest honor of my life if you wanted to call me Mom. Your first mommy, Sarah, will always be your angel mother who loves you from heaven. But if you want me to be your everyday mom here on Earth, I would love that more than anything." Now, 2 years later, Tommy lives with me permanently. Michael visits every weekend and has become the father he should have been all along. Present, attentive, and fiercely protective of his son. Baby Lucas stays with us on weekends too, and watching Tommy be a loving big brother fills my heart with joy. Tommy still sees a counselor once a month, and probably always will. Some wounds cut deep, and healing is a lifelong process. But he's thriving now. He plays on the school soccer team, has friends who come over for sleepovers, and fills our house with laughter and noise and beautiful, chaotic childhood energy. If you're listening to this story and you see signs that a child in your life is being hurt, if they're too quiet, too fearful, too eager to please, please don't look the other way. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Sometimes one caring adult can make all the difference between a child who suffers in silence and a child who gets the chance to heal and thrive. Love should never require permission, and no child should ever have to earn the right to basic kindness and care. Sometimes protecting a child means risking everything, but I can tell you from experience, it's always worth it.